Miles Morales, the spin-off, kinda sorta sequel to Insomniac's hit Spider-Man game on the PS4, came out alongside the PS5 a little while ago now, and honestly, it's a pretty good game. Doesn't reach the same emotional heights that the original did in my opinion, but it's still got a great story. And even though Miles' new Venom powers aren't super necessary during most of the gameplay in the main story, they're still really solid and fun to use. I even did a stream of the main campaign, feel free to check that out. But anyways, after finishing the game and thinking about what all that end credit scene might mean for Spider-Man 2, I realized what we should be wondering is how the timeline of Insomniac's corner of the Spider-Verse actually works so far. Mostly because their version of Peter Spider-Man appeared in the 2018 story Spider-geddon. Acting as a sequel to the 2014 Spider-Verse story, Spider-geddon brought a bunch of spider people, old and new, from all corners of the multiverse to fight off the Inheritors again, allowing the game version of Peter to interact with a bunch of different Spider-Men, including some of his alternate selves and even the 616 version of Miles. Honestly, it's a fun appearance from this version of the character, and it sets up some decent plot points for his universe after everything we saw in the first game. And having said all that, how surprised would you be if I told you this story doesn't fit into the canon of the two games we've gotten so far? Like, at all. Why? Yup, regardless of how you slice it, Spider-geddon doesn't fit into the PlayStation Spider-Man canon. And I'm gonna get into that in a second, but first I wanna mention that there's gonna be some light spoilers for both Spider-Man and Miles Morales in this video, so go and finish the games first and then watch this video. Or just watch my playthrough. Seriously, it's a lot of fun. Anyways, I don't know about any of you guys who played the games and read the comic, but I personally assumed the timeline went something like this. Spider-Man on the PS4, then Spider-geddon, then Miles Morales. I mean, yeah, nobody, including Peter, mentions discovering that there's an entire multiverse full of different Spider-Men out there, but to be fair, it's not like he's in the game all that much, and depending on when Spider-geddon actually happens between the games, then it's possible that they could have just kind of shrugged it off and got back to taking care of their New York. The thing is though, this version of the timeline doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and not just because it's never brought up in the other game. I mean seriously, meeting alternate versions of yourself and fighting in a big multiversal battle would be a pretty big deal for most people, so you think Peter would at least work it into one of his training sessions or something, right? But more importantly though, there's this whole issue with Miles' costume we gotta worry about too. See, in Spider-geddon number 4, the PS4 Peter and 616 Miles get to talking, and during their conversation, Peter makes a mention about liking 616 Miles' costume, obviously hinting that he'll make a version of the same one for his Miles when he gets back home. Problem is though, this never actually happens. Early in the game, Peter mentions that he's heading to Symkaria with Mary Jane, and the only suit he gives Miles before heading out is the crappy-looking Great Responsibility suit, based on the one Miles wore when he first appeared in 2011's Ultimate Fallout number 4. Later on, we get a montage of Miles making his classic suit with his friend Genki, and since we see the two of them trying out different looks and styles for the suit by themselves, I'm guessing Peter had zero input at any point here. I mean, if he did, why would he act like he's just now seeing the suit for the first time at the end of the game? Wouldn't you have seen pretty much the exact same suit relatively recently?
Man, I still can't get over that suit. So cool.
Shut the f up!
Now to be fair, I'm sure there's somebody out there who still thinks Spider-geddon could be canon if you just, reshuffle the timeline a little bit. I mean, yeah, maybe the comic doesn't make sense in between both games, but what if we put it at the very end of the timeline? There'd still be a few issues, like Peter being inspired to make his Miles a costume based on the one 616 Miles wears, but that kind of stuff can be retconned away pretty easy. Maybe Peter was just saying he'd be inspired to make some adjustments to the suit Miles is already wearing or something, who knows. Either way though, it makes way more sense that Peter would feel comfortable leaving New York in the hands of a Spider-Man that already went through a bunch of training and had experience saving it, right? So with all that in mind, it seems obvious that Spider-Man PS4 comes first in the timeline, then the new Miles Morales game, then the Spider-geddon story. Well, couple of problems. Outside of how it's still weird that nobody, including Peter, mentions the existence of an entire multiverse, we also have pieces of evidence proving that the story would have to take place directly after the first Spider-Man game. Remember that episode of Just the Facts that Peter's listening to in issue number 0? During Jameson's ranting, he references things he mentioned in the first game as if they're still pretty recent, like how Norman Osborn was still in the process of stepping down from his position as mayor.
Looking at the dark days just behind us, most of the people involved have faced consequences. Otto Octavius is in prison. Mayor Osborn resigned in disgrace.
And then there's that part where Peter mentioned how he's the only Spider-Person defending New York, meaning Miles still hasn't fully taken on the Spider-Man role yet at this point in the story. Really though, the only bit of proof we need is a statement from writer Christos Gage, who was involved in writing both the PS4 game and the Spider-geddon story. In an email sent over to Polygon, Gage stated, "We'll try to avoid huge spoilers for anyone who may read the comic before finishing the game." He also then confirmed that Spider-geddon takes place after the events of the first Spider-Man game, claiming that will inform where Peter's head is during the entire event. So if Spider-geddon doesn't make any sense after the first game, and it doesn't make any sense after the most recent game, then I guess the only thing we can do is say it isn't canon. I mean, to be fair, this is the world of comic books we're talking about here, so if Marvel or Sony really want to say it's canon, then I guess they could find a way to cram all this together. Maybe they can retcon the comic and get rid of the costume line like I mentioned earlier. Or maybe they could say the comic takes place during an alternate timeline in the main games or something. Either way though, both the Spider-geddon story and the PlayStation games are fun by themselves, so it's not like they really need to be tied together, but it still sucks that they aren't anyway. It would have been a fun way to introduce a Spider-Verse game at the very least. But anyways guys, that's my take on whether or not the Spider-geddon comic is considered canon to the PlayStation Spider-Man games. If you guys agreed with anything I said in this video, or if you have your own thoughts you want to throw out there, then go ahead and let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I will see you all next time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, then go ahead and click that like button, and if you're new, maybe consider clicking that subscribe button too. I've also got links to my Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and Patreon in the description. You should probably check those out too. And if you want to see more of my content, then you can click the link to my last video. It's right there in the middle of your screen. Alright, and I will see you all next time.